I want you to get together.
We've got Paul Stobbs, whose YouTube series is mainly the Nephilim look like clowns, and it's one I'm very familiar with. I've seen just about every video. This is a very extensive and it sounds a little goofy at first topic, but honestly, once you hear this guy out, you're gonna have a deeper understanding of some crazy stuff. So why don't we start off with what the Nephilim are to someone who might not be familiar with what that is?
Sure, good a place to start than any, guys. Yeah, thanks for having me. So the Nephilim, fundamentally, very quickly, are the offspring of fallen angels who mated with human women. You can understand the meaning of the word Nephilim through the etymology, through the Hebrew understanding of the word. It has two root words, Nephil and Nephal. Nephil, it basically means tyrannical ruler or giant, and Nephal means to fall in a various ways and applications. So falling, feller, fall down, to fall, fallen, all the falls basically come under that category of Nephal. So if you put those two words together, you get basically the plural for Nephilim, which basically means tyrannical giant rulers of a fallen nature. Um, a lot of people do make the mistake of thinking because the word fall is involved, they think it must have something to do with fallen angels. So the Nephilim are fallen angels, but that's pretty much a misunderstanding which needs to be corrected. I think they are specifically the offspring of angels who mixed with human women.
So yes, there's a lot of cultures that kind of talk about some sort of like a demigod or semi-divine heroes or the men of renown, stuff
Hmm.
like that. So
Absolutely.
your work basically says that all these like supernatural long living kings or hybrid kings, giants, like I said, the men of renown, are hybrid beings between some sort of a supernatural entity and human women.
That's correct. Yeah, so that's the basis of my thesis. I mean, I wasn't really a religious person growing up. I came at this originally into the conspiracy world through all the New Age stuff. The Mayan calendar, end of the world 2012 phenomena was what kind of sparked my curiosity into questioning things and looking into rabbit holes and going down my journey. But through that process, I found the truth to be in the biblical perspective, and I kind of started doing a bit of a deep dive into biblical history from about 2014. Um, and that research led me to understand this basic biblical history, which seems to be not really talked about in the churches, or not necessarily understood, or not considered as important as other parts of the Bible. And a lot of this information does come from the Book of Enoch, First Enoch, and there's much debate about whether or not that should be considered canon or not. But the Book of Enoch is quoted in the Bible, even by the apostles. So if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me, as far as I'm concerned. But the history laid out in the Book of Enoch, yeah, is a dark history about the time before the flood. And if you really look into it and look at cultures all around the world, not just through the biblical lens, but every culture, they all have a very similar story to what was echoed in the Book of Enoch. This tale of humanity corrupting themselves in the most heinous of ways, making deals with creatures that came from the heavens, fiery flying serpents or rainbow serpents or feathered serpents of some kind, creating cults dedicated to them and their demigod offspring, and these half angel or god hybrid human monsters became these brutal dictators who took over all the kingships over humanity and just furthered the corruption. Many people emulated them, wanted to be like them, so that just forced even more humans to corrupt themselves even further in a hope to be like the Nephilim and their gods. And there was nothing but evil in man's hearts continuously, up until the flood. And it kind of gives this explanation as to why a flood was even necessary. Because this is the problem, as a Christian. Now, as someone who didn't grow up in the Christian faith, these were stumbling blocks for me. What kind of god would flood the entire earth and kill millions of people? It seemed like such a cruel, arbitrary thing to do. What kind of loving, caring god would do such a thing? But then when you actually look into the history of what was going on then, it was a mercy more than anything, because if God hadn't have done what he did and saved Noah, who was basically the only human left who hadn't corrupted himself physically, not only just spiritually but physically, we wouldn't be here. That hard reset was necessary just to save humanity and mankind. So yeah, that's the basic biblical history which I learned that kind of set me up to then question, well, what would a hybrid between a seraphim class fiery serpent like being mixed with a human actually look like? And I came at it through the New Age perspective, like I said, which means I was akin to do kind of a psychedelic exploration who kind of came with the package. These I was doing the work to try and get connections with the spirit realm through means which might not necessarily be the best way of doing it, but they certainly worked. Things like DMT and heavy amounts of mushrooms and microdosing LSD and taking doing trip reports with the rest of them. And I understood there was a spiritual realm, so it was very clear to me that was there because I kind of seen it with my own eyes. But I'd always had this research that people kept finding machine elves or DMT jesters of some kind there, and I suppose in a way I was kind of looking for them myself. But while I was doing these things, I never actually met any of the entities. But when I gave myself over to Christ and kind of was born again and stopped doing drugs and sobered up, that's when these things really started to manifest to me and come clear that they were actually real and certainly there. So I had my own visions of these DMT jesters. I had my own vision of a huge, enormous, black and white, fractal patterned, wide grinned, purple glowing eyed monster jester thing, for no reason. It was just a random flash to me years after the fact of quitting all these drugs. And it certainly felt like in hindsight, well, it seems like now that I had stopped doing all of the things the demons enjoy, they were then coming for me. It was kind of a if we can't have you, nobody can type of situation. And having that vision of that jester, seeing it for myself, and then researching the biblical perspective and understanding that it was the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim that got stuck on a veil just beyond our perception on Earth and became demons, then there's something there. There's something to do with clowns and jesters and the Nephilim. There's certainly a link. So I kind of sat on that for a while, and then in 2016 there was the clown sightings, which the whole media had just blown up with and was showing everywhere. These menacing people stood on street corners, scaring people dressed like clowns, like really terrifying, demonic-looking clowns. And I had enough research into the occult and how the agenda works to understand that nothing gets on the media that isn't controlled. So if they're showing us clowns in this mass media sense, every single news station is picking up on it and pointing the camera at it, that must mean something. That must be a symbol of some kind, because nothing's by accident with these people when it comes to the mainstream. So that kind of sparked my interest, and I started to really dive into the clown as a symbol throughout history, and where does it come from, and is it related in any way to the Nephilim? And there was no prior work done about this topic that I could find. I saw one person making a mockumentary conspiracy theorist type thing, where he was pretending to be a conspiracy theorist, making us look silly and stupid, talking about the Nephilim, saying, yeah, the Nephilim had red hair and white skin, so the only explanation is that the Nephilim were interdimensional killer clowns from outer space. And he was making a joke, but I realized there's actually something to that. So as I was saying, I began this journey in 2016. I started a series kind of voicing my thoughts about this concept of the Nephilim being akin to something we call the clown in Visage, and is the clown in some way linked? And I'm like 43 episodes into the series now, and my work has become a deep anthropological study of ancestor spirit worship practices and rituals, who all venerate demons and the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. And They all dress something similar to, or with features that we would consider clownish, in order to be possessed by these ancestor spirits, which are the Nephilim. And it turns out, through my own research and history, which we can get into, but to summarize, we have invented, through secret societies in the West, their own version of an ancestor spirit worship ritual garb to be possessed by the Nephilim, and that costume is called a clown.
Yep, you nailed it, and I know that's what you've been getting across in your series, and it's all very comprehensive work. You connect a lot of things that no one would have really thought of, and really piece it together. Something I wanted to touch on too is how you basically brought it back to secret societies and that Freemasons and they're kind of the origins of the circus, and the circus is mimicking like what kind of happens in the psychedelic and spiritual realms, and obviously the exaggerated features of the clown is definitely like a caricature of a giant with the giant feet, or sometimes giants on clowns on stilts getting into the tiny clown car or holding a little tiny umbrella, tiny hat. Sometimes they even have the elongated skulls, and when you see the archaeological discoveries that have been suppressed about giant findings, they often do have like two rows of teeth, a big wide grin, six fingers, usually red hair, obviously the giant stature, and then
Canduar.
yeah, exactly. Many examples of exactly what you would describe is a big, red-headed, pale, kind of like grotesque, big grin smile being that we kind of have an inherent fear of, just like people who are afraid of spiders or snakes or something. Like as soon as I came across your work, it immediately was clicking to me too. Like, oh man, that's exactly why people just have this inherent fear of clowns, because this thing was like a predator. It's somewhere in our DNA to be like, no, I don't like that at all. Like just pure terror. And I'm sure you've seen the pictures before where it looks like the Rothschilds family has a bit of an elongated skull, and we know some of these elites and secret societies are about tracing their bloodline back to be, of this pure kingly bloodline that ultimately leads back to some sort of a mythological character or, demigod king who was ruling at some point. And if you think that they were never fully wiped out, and as the Nephilim had offsprings with humans, like the DNA would have, kind of like gotten weeded out, but there would be those with a small percentage of it still left who felt like they had the right to rule through lineage, and they do everything they can to keep that blood pure or gain possession or get possessed by these entities through these secret society rituals, or making us, kind of participate in it without really knowing that's what we're doing, but they're getting the desired result. And
I want you to get together